Russia has violated the agreement. They've been violating it for many years, and I don't know why President Obama didn't negotiate or pull out. And we're not going to let them violate a nuclear agreement and go out and do weapons, and we're not allowed to.
Now for our top international story this hour, we are examining the growing global trend of ditching the U.S. dollar.
Now, while President Trump often takes aim at the Fed's Jerome Powell and the central bank for the market's recent steep declines, Peter Schiff says actually both parties will be the ones to blame when the recession he says we're about to see makes the financial crisis of 2008 look like the roaring 20s by comparison.
So here's the thing. The Chinese government almost never says anything you wouldn't expect. That's their thing, their gimmick. They're incredibly careful, reserved, at least with their tongues. So when the Chinese president orders his military to prepare for war, serious indeed.
He urged the military to concentrate on advancing readiness for war.
The Chinese are preparing for war out loud. How, oh how, did we get to this?
Our concept of operations is to flow in our military assets with a priority to build up southern Texas, and then Arizona, and then California. We'll reinforce along priority points of entry so as to enhance CBP's ability to harden and secure the border.
President Trump's plan to pull out of the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty has been condemned by several world leaders, but Trump said he had good reason to do it.
Russia has violated the agreement. They've been violating it for many years, and I don't know why President Obama didn't negotiate or pull out. And we're not going to let them violate a nuclear agreement and go out and do weapons, and we're not allowed to.
The INF, signed in 1987, banned all ground-launched medium-range missiles with a range of between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. Germany was quick to criticize the decision and urged the U.S. to think carefully about the effects on Europe and the rest of the world. Russia's President Putin said he'd want an explanation from U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, who's currently in Moscow. Among those most disappointed by the move is the former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, who signed the treaty.
I think that the most comprehensive opinion about the U.S. exit from the treaty, which I share totally, was expressed by President Putin.
He added that it was a reversal of efforts to achieve nuclear disarmament. But President Trump's statement will not come as a surprise to President Putin, who last December warned that the U.S. was trying to undermine the agreement.
Euro-Pacific Capital CEO Peter Schiff joins us. But in the spirit of fair and balance, the man in charge of the trading group at TD Ameritrade, Executive Vice President Stephen Quirk, says October's volatility, and especially what we're seeing now, in no way signals the end of the world. All right, Peter, to you first. Why are you blaming both President Trump and Jay Powell of the Fed?
Well, I'm blaming both political parties. I think that the Republicans are going to take the blame because it's going to blow up on their watch. But if you want to name names, you got to go back to Alan Greenspan. You know, he's the one that really wrote this playbook. Every time we had a bear market while Greenspan was, chairman of the Fed, he would quickly restart the party with cheap money. And so we set this process in motion, but it's not going to work anymore. We've done it too many times.
Why is President Trump to blame, and why is Jay Powell to blame?
No, they're going to get blamed because they're the fall guys. But the problem started long before Trump was elected. You know, he called this a big, fat, ugly bubble when he was running.
But he's the one now asking for rates to stay low. Are you saying that the Federal Reserve should not raise in December, Peter, or should it even, dare I say, cut rates?
Now, look, it should raise rates, but the market's going to collapse as a result. I mean, they just haven't figured this out yet. We have a gigantic bubble, and the point I wanted to make is this bear market is not going to end quickly like the ones since 1987. This is going to be a protracted bear like the one we had from 1966 to 1982. 16 years without a new high, and meanwhile the cost of living went up dramatically. The cost of living is going to rise even more dramatically during this secular bear market. And look, there's nothing that can be done to stop this.
Aside from lambasting the Chinese at every opportunity, his tariffs, his sanctions, his trade war, he's also being very heavy-handed. Congress has just approved a second arms deal with Taiwan in 18 months.
The sales of weapons by the United States to Taiwan damages China's sovereignty and security interests.
Beijing sees China and Taiwan as two parts of a whole, two Chinese entities, same culture, ethnicity, same languages, with two separate governments, communist, capitalist. The end goal is to reunite into one state. There are differences, of course, currently preventing that, and about 100 kilometers of sea that separate the two. And Trump, always a fan of sticking it to the Chinese, he's been floating his warships right between the two Chinas.
We have expressed our concerns to the US side. The Taiwan issue concerns China's sovereignty and territorial integrity and is the most important and sensitive issue in China-US relations.
When it comes to Europe, we're talking about offensive infrastructure being created there, and we're talking about the violation from the US side of the articles of the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty.
Russia denies violating the treaty, which was the first ever arms control agreement to eliminate an entire class of missiles.
To update you on our efforts to prepare for enhanced security operations in order to address the potential for large groups of migrants to arrive at the U.S. border as part of a so-called caravan. As of this afternoon, we continue to track a large group of approximately 3,500 traveling through southern Mexico with a stated intent to reach the U.S. border. This group is near the Chiapas-Oaxaca border in southern Mexico. We're also aware of a second large group of migrants at the Ciudad Hidalgo border crossing between Guatemala and Mexico. Size estimates for the second group are around 3,000 as well. To put these numbers in context, we are already facing a border security and humanitarian crisis at our southwest border. Each day, on average, for the last 3 weeks, CBP has encountered a combination of almost 1,900 persons apprehended crossing our border illegally or presenting without documents at ports of entry.
But unfortunately, for America, I think the rhetoric of the Republicans and Trump, tax cuts are going to get blamed.
Hold on, we're heading,
deregulation is going to get blamed. Yeah.
We are now heading to more session lows here. We are now down about 411 points. Steve Quirk, you have the benefit right now of the TD Ameritrade herd, and you can check in on that herd and see what they are or are not doing. You have a massive $1.3 trillion in assets over there. How is the herd behaving, and are you as bearish or worried as Peter is?
What I'll do is I'll give you a reflection, because thanks for having me. I think the value that I bring is telling you what our 11 million retail clients are doing. Last time I was on about 2 weeks ago, I told you they're quite contrarian as a group. So when we see sell-offs, typically we see stronger buying. We've noticed in the last 4 months that sentiment has really dialed back. In other words, the buys and sells are almost evenly balanced. And we're seeing more rotation into what I would call the cyclicals, the utilities, things that they think lower beta stocks that are going to protect them should we continue to see this down move. So I would say they're not optimistically saying this is going to bounce right back, but they're also not saying this is the end of the world.
Over half of these arrivals have been made up of family units and unaccompanied children who have placed themselves in the hands of violent human smugglers, paying $7,000 per person to make the journey. They're incentivized to try to cross by our border by the gaps in our legal framework and the expectation that they will be allowed to stay. This means that at any given moment, there are tens of thousands of intending migrants between the Guatemala border and the U.S. border moving toward us at any given time. Within that flow, and included, are about 17,000 criminals last year, along with hardened smugglers and people from over 100 countries around the world. And our immigration system is unable to effectively process and repatriate those without the right to remain in the United States due to extensive backlogs in our courts and court restrictions on detaining people through their immigration proceedings. What is new and challenging about this caravan phenomenon is the formation of multiple large groups which present unique safety and border security threats. For the two large groups that we're following, we have already seen the first one make unlawful entry across 2 international borders, and the second, still in Guatemala, has deployed violent and dangerous tactics against both Guatemalan and Mexican border security teams. Accordingly, we are preparing for the contingency of a large group of arriving persons intending to enter the United States in the next several weeks. Our message to the organizers and participants of this caravan is simple. As the President and Secretary Nielsen have made clear, we will not allow a large group to enter the United States in an unsafe and unlawful manner.
Our mission of Homeland Defense is inextricably linked to the Department of Homeland Security's mission of Homeland Security. Operation Faithful Patriot, as we've named the military operation supporting CBP in hardening the southwest border, is the latest example of this critical partnership. In a macro sense, our concept of operations is to flow in our military assets with a priority to build up southern Texas, and then Arizona, and then California. We'll reinforce along priority points of entry so as to enhance CBP's ability to harden and secure the border. The specific request for assistance is for the active duty military to enhance the capacity and capabilities of CBP by providing robust military capabilities. Our first level of effort with CBP will be to harden the points of entry and address key gaps in areas around the points of entry. And here's a list of just some of the capability that we're bringing. First, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They bring amazing expertise earned through years of experience under challenging conditions, including the current work of building the border wall. We're also bringing 3 highly experienced and capable combat engineering battalions with expertise in building temporary vehicle barriers, fencing, and are bringing them in with heavy equipment, which as we speak right now is line hauling towards Texas. We're bringing military planning teams that are already actively engaged with their CBP counterparts. We've integrated command and control capabilities. We're working with our aviation, engineering, medical, and logistic resources to bring them to bear. We're bringing 3 medium-lift helicopter companies in. These are aircraft equipped with the latest technology. They're enhanced with optics. They have NVGs. They have sensors that will allow them to operate at night and be able to provide assistance to bring our CBP personnel exactly where they need to be, regardless of the conditions. We'll be able to spot and identify groups and rapidly deploy CBP personnel where they're needed. The helicopters will ensure the CBP agents can arrive in the most austere locations. They can fast rope down if they need to. They can conduct and work their law enforcement activities. These aircraft will also ensure those agents needing medical assistance will be able to get that assistance when required. In addition, we're bringing military police units. We're bringing strategic airlift to bear. As we sit right now, we have 3 C-130s and a C-17 that is ready to deploy CBP personnel wherever they need to be at any time. We have deployable medical units. We have the logistical support. We have command posts. We're bringing again command posts so we can combine with CBP, and we have combined command posts where our operational commanders will be working side by side to integrate our efforts. And make no mistakes, as we sit right here today, we have about 800 soldiers that are on their way to Texas right now. They're coming from Fort Campbell. They're coming from Fort Knox. They're moving closer to the border. They're going to continue their training, and they're ready to deploy to be actually employed on the border. We're deploying aviation assets that can quickly transport our CBP personnel. But it isn't just the men and equipment and the soldiers that we're bringing. We've already brought critical material, and it's already in place. We have enough concertina wire to cover up to 22 miles already deployed, already to the border. We have additional concertina wire that we can string with over 150 miles available. Additionally, working at where the reinforcements are needed so we can get it exactly where CBP wants us to put it. By the end of this week, we will deploy over 5,200 soldiers to the southwest border. That is just the start of this operation. We'll continue to adjust the numbers and inform you of those, but please know that's in addition to the 2,092 that are already employed from our National Guard Operation Guardian support that's been so effective. And my final point I'd like to stress is that everything I've discussed here fully adheres to our current authorities and governed by law and policy. We know border security is national security. and the U.S. military will advance CBP's capability to harden the border. Department of Defense is already and will continue to provide support to CBP to secure the border. Thank you.
Vladimir Putin, that's what many pro-Kremlin analysts think, but fears about an unprecedented escalation are growing, and the Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said that Trump's move is seen here as an ultimatum, and he said that he is expecting Bolton to explain professionally what did Trump mean. And a senior Russian lawmaker, the head of the Russian upper house of parliament, Konstantin Kosachev, said that if the US decides to stop this treaty, it will be a catastrophe, that the US will be able to deploy its intermediate range forces in Baltic states, and Russia will give an immediate and very strong answer.
If the United States drops the agreement and then proceeds with deploying its medium-range missiles, let's say in Poland or in the Baltic states, that will definitely mean a completely new military threat towards Russia, because these missiles will have capacity of reaching Russian areas far beyond the Ural Mountains, and that's definitely a substantial threat towards Russian national security. And secondly, it will undermine the capacity of Russia to strike back in case a nuclear conflict starts. So it will undermine the grounds of stability in terms of nuclear weapons in more general terms, and definitely Russia will have to respond. And as Mr. Putin already 1 year ago mentioned, the Russian response will be immediate. It will be very quick, and we do have capacities to do that. But all that would put into a completely new zone of highest possible risks the whole area of Europe. So the European countries are hostages of this situation, and I hope they will be able to express their opinion on that. We see how Germany starts to react, we see how France starts to react, but unfortunately we see other countries like the United Kingdom who are still going in the tracks of the United States of America, supporting them in all their explosive. That Mr. Putin, as the president of Russia, as early as in 2007, 11 years ago, came up with an official proposal to modernize this treaty, making it universal by including in this treaty other countries who possess medium-range missiles. It's not just China, it's other nuclear powers, it's Israel, Pakistan, India, so many other countries. Yes, this proposal is still on the board, but for that you don't need to undermine the existing treaty. You should propose amendments, you should start talks with other countries which would be eventual participants in the future agreement, but to delete something in order to create anything which would be better, for me is an absolutely unacceptable way of logic.